6 best places to go overseas if you don't want to learn a new language. We're going to tell you in just a minute. Hi, I'm Kathleen Petticord.
I'm Leif Simon.
It's a new episode of our Live and Invest Overseas podcast. One of the main reasons someone, maybe you, could be reluctant to move to a new country, even if they're dying to do it, if it's their dream of a lifetime, is because they're worried they'll have to learn a new language and afraid they just won't be able to, or frankly, just don't want to have to.
Right.
You don't necessarily have to. We have 6 places where you could live or retire overseas comfortably, happily, build a very rich, fulfilling life, and not have to learn a new language. Let's start with 3 places, 3 countries where, in fact, the language is English.
Right, exactly. And we're not talking about the UK, Australia, or New Zealand. We're talking about places where you can get residency, where you can actually move. Although you can move to the UK, it's a bit complicated. But the first one is Belize. And Belize is one of the former UK
British
colonies. And so English is the language, official language. A lot of people speak Spanish as well because Belize is surrounded by Spanish-speaking.
Right there in Central America.
But everything is done in government and legal-wise in English in Belize.
Right. So exactly, that's something that you may not have thought about. You may just be thinking about getting through the day without having to learn a new language. But there's another level to it that can be even a little more intimidating, which is the legal aspect.
Right.
If you're going to be signing a contract for even a lease, a rental, but certainly if you're going to buy, if all the contracts are in Spanish or French or Portuguese, it's a little more intimidating.
Right. So what does Belize have to offer besides speaking English? Well, it's a great destination for beaches and weather. It's a Caribbean destination. There are islands off of the coast of Belize that would qualify as Caribbean islands. And the downside is hurricanes. So you do have the potential for hurricanes in Belize.
They get them almost every year, not in a dramatic way, but storms every year.
Not as bad as the Gulf Coast of the U.S. this year,
exactly.
But once every couple of years, so you get a pretty strong storm coming through Belize, which also hits the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico, which has another destination we'll talk about in a second.
But for me, maybe the most compelling reason to look at Belize can be the people and the society and the culture. It's the most diverse, eclectic, and open-minded and welcoming culture, in fact, that I know of, except for the next country we're going to talk about. I would put them on par, each with the other, but they're very different places. In this part of the world, though, in the Americas, Belize really is the most open-minded. The Belizeans aren't worried about who you are, where you came from, or anything about you, except that you're doing your best and you're not causing them any problem. It's very much live and let live.
Exactly.
I'll do my thing, you do yours, I'll mind my business, you mind your business, and everybody gets along. All right, the second place, which again, I think as well as Belize is very open-minded and open-hearted and welcoming culture, is Ireland.
Right.
Totally different place.
Before we jump to Ireland, we didn't mention, so Belize for residency is fairly straightforward. There's the QRP program that has, it's for retirees. If you have $2,000 a month in pension income or Social Security, you can qualify, or you can just move to Belize.
Right.
If you're there for 12 months straight renewing your tourist visa, you can then apply for permanent residency. So Belize has a very easy way to live there, is just by showing up and continue to renew your tourist visa.
Which is a great thing to point out because you may have heard of the QRP program, the Qualified Retiree Person Program, I think is what it's called. And that's been very well promoted, and it can make a lot of sense for a lot of people, but it requires a minimum monthly income of $2,000.
Right.
That might not work for everyone. But you do have an option that you may not have heard about because it just isn't discussed as often. It requires no proof of income. It requires no upfront investment in real estate or anything else.
You just
show up.
You're just in Belize. It does require that to show that you can take care of yourself while you're there, but that's, you don't need $2,000 a month to live in Belize. Ireland, on the other hand, has decided that they don't really want retirees, and so they changed their immigration law a few years ago now. So I think it's pushing more than 5 years, 6 years, to create a new, what they call stamp zero. So different immigration stamps have a number depending on what you're applying for. Stamp zero is for persons of means, which includes retirees, but it requires 50,000 euros of income, proving 50,000 euros of income
a year
per person. Yeah, per person per year, which is a high threshold, especially for a retiree. It doesn't have to be pension or Social Security income. It could be dividends or rental income or whatever, but you have to show that level. But if you do have that level, then Ireland is a great place to spend time. The Irish are friendly and talkative, and from a retiree's perspective, Ireland couldn't be a better place to live other than the weather.
Right. So as you may know, we lived in Ireland for 7 years when our children were young, when Leif and I were first married. And we found the experience kind of maddening at the time because we were there as kind of young people with a new family trying to launch a business, grow a business. And we found the Irish approach to business frustrating because they don't prioritize it. They prioritize life and living
Right.
and crack, as they refer to it, just having a good time. And at retirement, of course, that can be exactly what you're looking for. So
but stopping in the middle of the day, in the middle of the road to have a 20-minute conversation, is that something you're looking for
when you're rushing to get to the office?
When you're running a business. But for
Right.
retirees, it's perfect.
All right. All right. Number 3 on our list of countries where, in fact, the language is English, so no language study required, would be Malta.
Right. And Malta actually has 2 official languages, English, again, it was a former British colony, and Maltese. But all legal documents are in English as well as Maltese, so you can get by in English, no problem. The downside for Malta also is the getting residency isn't as easy as Belize. But they have 4 different programs in Malta that you can look at for getting residency. The other thing that some people we know have been to Malta aren't happy about is in the summertime, it can be hot. So, above 95, above 100 degrees during the summer. But that's because of its location. It's in the middle of the Mediterranean. It's the crossroads between Southern Europe and North Africa. So from a seeing the region perspective, Malta is in a very excellent position.
As a base for travel, it's really ideal.
And it has huge history. The Knights Templar and all the Crusade stuff that went on there. Lots of architecture and buildings to look at as well.
Okay, now those 3 countries speak English. Everybody is going to speak English. They may speak something else as well, Spanish in Belize, Maltese in Malta, but they all speak English, Gaelic in Ireland.
Right, but the official language is English.
Here are 3 countries where the language is not officially English, but there are pockets of these countries or these specific locations we want to highlight where English would be spoken by most everyone you would interact with.
You could get by without learning the local language if you didn't want to.
Okay, number 1 on this list, we put Playa del Carmen, Mexico.
Right, so there's lots of places in Mexico that are tourist spots. Playa del Carmen is one of them. Playa del Carmen's been a tourist spot for so long that the local Mexicans, to get jobs in the tourist industry, they're learning English, from birth, basically. So there's a lot of English speakers in the Playa del Carmen area. This is a beach area, so lots of tourist amenities as far as restaurants go and other outdoor activities. Plus in the Yucatan Peninsula, where Playa del Carmen is located, you have a lot of Mayan history. So you have Mayan ruins to visit, fishing off the coast and any kind of water activity that you can think of.
Right, so it's an ideal Caribbean spot. If your retirement dream is the Caribbean and you don't want to learn another language, I would put Playa del Carmen at the top of the list alongside Ambergris Caye, Belize,
right,
for example. One point I would make about Playa del Carmen, as Leif suggested, it's very touristy. It's a big and growing tourist destination, which could be a big plus for you or a big minus. So with tourists comes all of the infrastructure, the amenities, the services that tourists want, and that can be great. The restaurants, the shopping, the nightlife, and the activities, all kinds of water sports and all of that would be so easy, accessible, and affordable in Playa del Carmen. But at the same time, you are going to have the souvenir shops and the tourist touts and people approaching you to see if you want your picture taken on the beach.
It's not the real Mexico. If you want the Mexico culture and to be living in Mexico, it's not Playa del Carmen. Playa del Carmen is just an extension of Florida from a beach resort kind of perspective.
Okay, we're staying in Mexico with the second pick for a place where the language isn't officially English, but you wouldn't need to learn another one. On the other side of Mexico, Puerto Vallarta.
Right, and Puerto Vallarta, same thing. 30, 40 years of tourism, lots of locals learning English from a young age, lots of tourists, lots of retirees as well in Puerto Vallarta, and lots of options. Puerto Vallarta, the town is relatively small, but the whole area has expanded in lots of development from resorts, but also, you know, I can't think of the word now.
From expats?
But yeah,
from retirees?
The gated communities. That's the word I'm looking for. Sorry, the gated communities for retirees and for expats. So Puerto Vallarta is not terribly dissimilar from a weather perspective to Southern California, which is why a lot of people like it. Again, on the Pacific coast, you don't have the storms as much, although Puerto Vallarta can be hit by Pacific typhoons that kick back in and come that way. There was one earlier this year.
Okay.
Not a lot of damage, but a lot of rain.
So Puerto Vallarta, I would say, would be the most developed choice on the Pacific coast. If you're looking for Pacific coast living, you might be looking down that coast, Mexico, Costa Rica, Panama, Nicaragua. Those are all options you might be considering for a Pacific coast lifestyle with the kind of crashing surf and surf beaches, etc. For the most part, your options in, say, Nicaragua for sure, but even in Costa Rica, Panama, are going to be less developed.
Right.
Puerto Vallarta, there's a Walmart in Puerto Vallarta,
right.
for example.
Shopping in Puerto Vallarta is not unlike shopping in the U.S. if that's what you're looking for. And then Mexico in general has easy residency options and easy access from the U.S., as does Belize. So lots of flights going in and out of Cancun to access Playa del Carmen, and lots of direct flights into the Puerto Vallarta airport as well.
All right. Pick number 6 for where to think about living or retiring overseas if you don't want to learn a new language is Algarve, Portugal, which you may not be surprised to hear us include.
Right.
We talk a lot
about Algarve as a great destination for retiring, and English being spoken is one reason why. They have a close relationship, Portugal does, with the UK, and a lot of British retirees and expats have moved to the Algarve, and over the years, the Portuguese in that area in particular have learned English. So you're going to have to pick up some Portuguese probably, but you can get by with English for the most part, and don't have to become fluent in Portuguese
for sure.
to live in the Algarve.
For sure. And why Algarve in general? Take a step back beyond language and beautiful beaches, long coastline, great weather, although there is a winter, but it's very mild. And because there is a winter, there is seasonality. So one thing to consider when shopping the Algarve coast, there are many towns in this part of Portugal, and each one has its own charm and flavor and cultural appeals. But look at which ones are more affected by seasonality. Some of them become very quiet in the winter.
Right. Some of the smaller towns will have, all the restaurants will close. So if you like to go to restaurants, you want a town that is big enough to support restaurants in the winter so that you can partake in that, or be willing to drive to the next town over. But the seasonality there can be an issue in the wintertime.
And then again, we'll make the point about residency, which is very easy to establish in Portugal. You have a number of good options depending on your situation.
Right. Two basic options: the Golden Visa option, which is buying property in Portugal, but if your plan is to live there full time, the easier option is just the self-sufficiency one, where you can show enough income to support yourself, and you can get residency in Portugal. And that threshold is around 1,200 euros a month is what our attorney there recommends, although the official threshold is lower. It's at the discretion of whoever's reviewing the residency application.
And 1,200 euros a month is less than the average Social Security check. So it's an example of a place where with the average Social Security check right now is about $1,500 a month. So this is a place where if you're receiving, the average amount in Social Security, and that's all the income you have, you could still be looking at Algarve. It's still realistic.
Right.
All right. I hope we've given you reason to take lack of language skills off your list of reasons not to think about living or retiring overseas. Thank you for listening. We'll be again in touch next week with a new episode of the Live and Invest Overseas podcast. Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode of our Live and Invest Overseas podcast. For more, please visit liveandinvestoverseas.com/podcast, where you'll find lots more information and resources to help you live better and retire well overseas.